I sat there staring at my screen at 3 a.m., watching another perfectly good setup turn into a disaster. Not because the market was wrong, but because something inside me pressed the button when I knew I shouldn't have. For years, I thought trading was about finding the right strategy, the perfect indicator, the one setup that would finally make everything click. But the truth I discovered through Carl Jung's shadow work changed everything. And what I'm about to share with you isn't just another trading psychology lecture. It's the key to understanding why you sabotage yourself right when you're about to win. Let me take you back to a moment that broke me. It was a Tuesday morning, nothing special, just another day in front of the charts. I had spent the entire weekend preparing, backtesting, journaling, writing down my rules in bold letters like some kind of sacred contract with myself. This week would be different. This week, I would finally trade like the professional I knew I could be. The market opened clean. My setup appeared exactly as planned. EUR/USD was coiling at a key level, everything lined up, the confluence was perfect. I entered with precision, 1% risk, stop loss placed exactly where it should be. For the first hour, I watched price move in my favor, slowly, steadily. My heart was calm. My mind was clear. This was it. This was the trader I was meant to be. And then something shifted. I don't know what triggered it. Maybe it was the slight pullback. Maybe it was the memory of last week's loss. Maybe it was nothing at all. But suddenly, I felt this strange pressure in my chest, this voice whispering that I should take profit now, that holding was dangerous, that the market was about to turn against me. I knew it wasn't rational. I knew my plan said to let it run to target. But my hand moved anyway. I clicked exit. 2 minutes later, price exploded exactly where my analysis predicted, shooting straight to my original target and beyond. I sat there frozen, watching thousands of dollars evaporate, not because I was wrong about the market, but because I was terrified of being right. That moment haunted me for weeks. Not the loss itself, but the realization that I wasn't fighting the market. I was fighting myself, and I was losing. Every single day, I started noticing a pattern, a shadow that followed me through every trading session. When I was supposed to be patient, I rushed. When I should have been aggressive, I hesitated. When my system said enter, I froze. When it said wait, I jumped in like I was possessed. It was like there were two traders inside me, one who knew exactly what to do, and another who did the complete opposite the moment money was on the line. I began journaling obsessively. Not just my trades but my thoughts, my feelings, the strange sensations in my body, right before I made a decision. And what I found terrified me. Every bad trade, every impulsive click, every rule I broke, they all happened when I felt a specific emotion, something I couldn't quite name, something that lived beneath the surface of my awareness. It felt like a void, a hole inside me that the market would somehow fill if I just won big enough, fast enough, often enough. I wasn't trading to build wealth. I was trading to prove something. To escape something. To avoid feeling something I didn't want to face. That's when I stumbled across Carl Jung's concept of the shadow. And everything changed. Jung described the shadow as the part of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge, the aspects of our personality we've buried, denied, or rejected because they don't fit the image we want to project to the world. It's not just our darkness. It's everything we've pushed away, our anger, our fear, our neediness, our shame, even our power and confidence, if we were taught those things were dangerous. The shadow doesn't disappear just because we ignore it. It lives in the basement of our psyche, pulling levers, whispering suggestions, taking control when we're stressed, tired, or triggered. And in trading, the shadow doesn't just whisper. It trades. Think about it. Every time you broke your rules, who was really making that decision? Every time you doubled down on a losing position, who was that? Every time you chased a setup out of FOMO, cut a winner too early, revenge traded after a loss, that wasn't the disciplined trader you want to be. That was your shadow, operating from the dark, using your trading account as a stage to act out unresolved emotional wounds you didn't even know you had. I started studying Jung deeper, not as an academic exercise, but as survival. I needed to understand this force inside me that kept sabotaging my progress. And I discovered something profound. Jung believed that the shadow isn't your enemy. It's a part of you that got exiled because it didn't fit, because showing it felt unsafe, because expressing it brought punishment or rejection. Your shadow is often the part of you that's still 8 years old, still wounded, still trying to protect you using strategies that worked back then, but destroy you now. Let me tell you about a trader I worked with named Marcus. Brilliant analyst, incredible at spotting setups. His chart reading was almost surgical. But he couldn't hold a winner. Ever. The moment a trade went into profit, he'd close it. Sometimes within minutes. He'd watch price continue running for hours after he exited, leaving thousands on the table week after week. When I asked him why, he said it just felt wrong to hold, like something bad was about to happen. We dug deeper. And we found it. When Marcus was 12, his father lost everything in a business venture, money Marcus's mother had been saving for years. The family fell apart. And young Marcus learned a lesson that carved itself into his nervous system. Winning is temporary. Success leads to loss. If you get something good, hold on to it tight or it'll be taken away. So decades later, sitting at a trading desk, whenever Marcus saw profit, his shadow activated. That 12-year-old boy took over, terrified that holding would lead to disaster, convinced that taking something small and safe was better than risking it all. Marcus wasn't trading the chart. He was trading his childhood trauma. And he didn't even know it until we brought his shadow into the light. This is what Jung meant when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Your shadow isn't fate. It's just unconscious. And the moment you make it conscious, the moment you see it, name it, understand where it came from, it loses its power over you. Not completely. Not overnight. But enough to give you a choice. And in trading, choice is everything. So how do you actually do this? How do you meet your shadow and integrate it so it stops sabotaging your trades? The first step is radical honesty. You have to stop pretending you're a logical, disciplined machine who just needs a better strategy. You have to admit that something else is operating inside you, something emotional, something wounded, something that's been making decisions from the dark for years. This isn't weakness. This is courage. Because facing your shadow requires you to look at the parts of yourself you've spent a lifetime avoiding. Start by tracking your emotional state before every trade. Not just whether you feel good or bad, but specifically what you feel. Are you anxious, excited, angry, bored, desperate, numb? Write it down. Then after the trade, win or loss, write down what you felt during the decision-making process. Did you feel rushed? Did you feel a compulsion to act even though nothing had triggered? Did you feel fear even though the setup was perfect? These emotional signatures are breadcrumbs. Follow them back. They'll lead you to your shadow. I remember the day I found mine. I was reviewing a particularly brutal trading day, 5 losses in a row, all impulsive, all outside my plan. As I journaled, I noticed a pattern. Every single trade happened after I checked my phone and saw someone else posting wins on social media. The feeling was instant, like a punch in the chest, this overwhelming sense that I was falling behind, that everyone else was getting rich while I was stuck. And in that moment, I didn't care about my strategy. I didn't care about risk management. I just needed to catch up. I needed to prove I wasn't a failure. That need, that desperation to prove my worth, that was my shadow. It wasn't about money. It was about significance. Somewhere deep inside, I believed that if I didn't succeed, if I didn't win, I was worthless. And that belief, buried under years of achievement and ambition, was running my worst trades. Once I saw it, really saw it, I could finally start working with it instead of being controlled by it. Jung taught a technique called active imagination, where you dialogue with your shadow, treat it like a separate entity you can talk to, understand, negotiate with. It sounds strange, I know, but it works. When you feel that impulse to overtrade, to revenge trade, to break your rules, pause, close your eyes, and ask, who wants this trade? What part of me is asking for this? Listen. Actually listen. You might hear a voice that sounds young, scared, angry. You might feel a sensation in your body, tightness in your chest, heat in your face. That's your shadow speaking. And instead of fighting it, instead of pushing it down or pretending it's not there, acknowledge it. Say, I see you. I hear you. I know you're trying to protect me. But this isn't the way. Thank it. Yes, thank it. Because your shadow, no matter how destructive it seems, is trying to help you survive using the only tools it has. It just doesn't know that survival and success in trading require a different approach. I started doing this before every trading session. I'd sit in silence, close my platform, and ask, who's showing up today? Am I trading from my highest self, or is my shadow trying to take the wheel? And if I felt the shadow there, hungry, desperate, scared, I wouldn't trade. Not because I was weak, but because I was wise enough to know that trading from that state would only reinforce the pattern. I'd wait, I'd breathe, I'd journal. And sometimes I'd just walk away. The transformation wasn't instant. There were days I still let the shadow trade. Days I still pressed the button knowing I shouldn't. But each time, the gap between impulse and action grew a little wider. The space between feeling the urge and making the choice expanded just enough for awareness to slip in. And in that space, freedom lived. Here's what most trading psychology content gets wrong. They tell you to suppress your emotions, to become a robot, to eliminate fear and greed like they're diseases. But Jung understood something deeper. You can't eliminate the shadow. You can only integrate it. And integration doesn't mean erasing the parts of you that feel. It means bringing them into the light, understanding them, and choosing consciously how to respond instead of reacting unconsciously. Think about fear. Every trading educator tells you to overcome fear, to trade without it. But fear isn't your enemy. Fear is information. The question isn't how to stop feeling fear. The question is, what is this fear trying to protect me from? Is it protecting me from real danger, or is it replaying an old wound that has nothing to do with this trade? I worked with a trader named Sarah who was paralyzed by fear. She could analyze setups perfectly, but when it came time to enter, she froze. Every single time. She'd watch the trade play out exactly as she predicted, never pulling the trigger, leaving thousands of dollars on the table in missed opportunities. When we explored her shadow, we found a memory. Sarah grew up in a household where mistakes were met with rage. Her father would explode if she spilled milk, forgot her homework, said the wrong thing. So young Sarah learned that action equals danger, that doing nothing is safer than doing something wrong. Decades later, her shadow still believed that. Every time she moved to enter a trade, her nervous system screamed, "Don't act, you'll be punished." The fear wasn't about the market. It was about survival. Once Sarah saw this, once she understood that her fear was an old defense mechanism trying to protect a little girl who no longer existed, she could start rewiring it. She began small, entering tiny positions, proving to her nervous system that action wouldn't result in punishment. Slowly, the shadow released its grip. This is shadow work. It's not about becoming fearless. It's about understanding where your fear comes from, what it's trying to protect, and whether that protection is still necessary. Most of the time, it's not. Most of the time, your shadow is fighting battles that ended years ago, using weapons that no longer serve you. Greed works the same way. Traders are told to control their greed, to stay disciplined, to stick to the plan. But greed isn't just wanting more. But greed is often a shadow response to scarcity, to a belief that there will never be enough, that you have to grab everything now or you'll lose your chance. If you grew up poor, if you watched your parents struggle, if you learned that money equals safety and losing money equals disaster, your shadow will trade from that wound. It'll push you to over-leverage, to chase every setup, to hold losing positions hoping for a miracle, because letting go feels like accepting scarcity all over again. I remember hitting my first really big win, a trade that paid more in 1 week than I used to make in 6 months at my old job. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I felt this crushing anxiety, this voice saying, "This won't last. You need to make it again. Prove it wasn't luck." Within 3 days, I'd given half of it back, over, trading, forcing setups, trying to recreate the high. My shadow was terrified that the abundance was temporary, that I'd go back to struggling. so it sabotaged the very success it was chasing. Jung believed that the shadow often contains not just our darkness, but our light. The qualities we were told were too much, too bold, too powerful. For some traders, the shadow isn't just fear and greed. It's confidence. It's the part of you that knows you can succeed but learn to hide that knowing because showing it brought jealousy, criticism, or rejection. So you unconsciously sabotage yourself, cut winners early. Second, guess your analysis, stays small, because staying small feels safer than shining and being attacked. This was true for a trader I knew named David. Incredibly talented, but he'd never let himself fully commit. He'd allocate a tiny percentage of his capital, trade like he didn't really believe in himself, and whenever he started gaining momentum, he'd pull back. When we uncovered his shadow, we found a father who mocked ambition, who called dreamers fools, who taught David that wanting more was arrogant. So David's shadow kept him playing small, not to punish him, but to protect him from the shame of being seen as arrogant. The way out is the same. Bring it to light. See it. Name it. Understand that your shadow is doing what it thinks is best for you based on outdated information. And then, consciously choose differently. Tell your shadow, I see you trying to keep me safe, but I don't need that protection anymore. I'm ready to succeed. And if people judge me, I'll survive that too. Here's a practical exercise Jung would call shadow journaling. After every trading session, especially the ones that went sideways, write down your answers to these questions. What did I feel right before I made that decision? Where in my body did I feel it? What does this feeling remind me of from my past? If this feeling could speak, what would it say? What is it trying to protect me from? Is that protection still necessary? Do this consistently, and you'll start seeing patterns. You'll notice that the same emotional states trigger the same trading mistakes. You'll see that your shadow shows up when you're tired, when you're stressed, when you're triggered by something in your personal life. And once you see the pattern, you can interrupt it. Another powerful technique is what Jung called confronting the shadow. When you feel the urge to do something you know you shouldn't, stop. Don't act. Just sit with the feeling. Let it be there. Feel the discomfort, the pressure, the craving, and ask it, what do you need? What are you really looking for? Most of the time, your shadow isn't looking for money. It's looking for validation, for safety, for significance, for control, for relief from pain. And the market can't give you any of those things. Only you can. I started practicing this during my sessions. When I felt the impulse to revenge trade, I'd close the platform and sit. I'd feel the anger in my chest, the frustration in my jaw, the desperate need to get it back. And I'd ask, what do I really need right now? The answer was never another trade. It was usually rest, or acknowledgement, or forgiveness, or just permission to be human and make mistakes without it meaning I was a failure. Once I gave myself that, the urge to trade would dissolve. Not always, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to build a different relationship with myself, with the market, with my shadow. Here's the truth nobody wants to hear. You will never eliminate your shadow. It's part of being human. The goal isn't to erase it. The goal is integration. Integration means you stop fighting with yourself. You stop splitting your psyche into good trader and bad trader, disciplined self and impulsive self. You bring all of it together, acknowledge all of it, and operate from wholeness instead of fragmentation. Jung said, I'd rather be whole than good. In trading, being whole means accepting that you'll feel fear, greed, impatience, all of it. But instead of letting those feelings unconsciously drive your behavior, you feel them, understand them, and choose your actions consciously. That's mastery. Not the absence of emotion, but the conscious relationship with it. This is why so many traders fail even with perfect strategies. Because they're trying to trade from only half of themselves, the rational half, while the shadow sits in the basement pulling levers they can't see. You can't win that way. You'll always be at war with yourself. And when you're at war with yourself, the market becomes a battlefield where you fight ghosts instead of following probabilities. The most powerful shift I made was treating my shadow not as an enemy, but as a child. A scared, wounded child who never learned better tools. When I felt the urge to overtrade, instead of beating myself up, I'd picture that kid, desperate to prove he mattered, terrified of being forgotten. And I'd talk to him. I see you. You matter. But this isn't the way. Let me show you a different way. It sounds soft. It sounds weak. But it's the strongest thing I've ever done. Because when you make peace with your shadow, when you integrate it instead of fighting it, you stop leaking energy into internal battles. You stop sabotaging yourself right when you're about to win. You stop repeating the same patterns and expecting different results. The market will always be uncertain. It will always be chaotic. But you don't have to be. When your shadow is integrated, when you're operating from wholeness, you can sit in front of the charts with clarity, with calm, with presence. You can execute your plan not because you're forcing yourself to follow rules, but because you're aligned, because every part of you agrees this is the right path. That's freedom. That's what Jung called individuation. The process of becoming whole. And in trading, wholeness is the only edge that truly matters. Because you can have the best strategy in the world, but if your shadow is trading, you'll find a way to lose. And you can have a mediocre strategy, but if you're whole, if you're conscious, you'll find a way to win. So stop fighting yourself. Stop trying to eliminate the parts of you that feel, that hurt, that want. Bring them into the light. See them. Understand them. Integrate them. Let your shadow become your ally instead of your saboteur. This is the work, not chart patterns, not indicators, not systems. The work is you. The shadow technique isn't a quick fix. It's a lifelong practice. But it's the practice that changes everything. Because once you stop being your own worst enemy, the market becomes what it always was, just a reflection, a mirror showing you exactly who you are and what you still need to heal. And when you finally see yourself clearly, when you trade from that place of integrated wholeness, you realize something profound. You were never broken. You were just unconscious. And now, you're awake.